Hello, thank you so much for tuning in. This is session 5 of 6 within our Career Navigation for People with Mood Disorders series. My name is Caroline Fraissinet. I have a doctorate in organizational change and leadership. I am very excited to present today about work-life balance. This recording, by the way, was made after the fact. It originally aired on not September, July 25th. So with that said, our agenda for today will be starting with understanding your personal needs as at work as somebody with a mood disorder, managing your work and energy within a work context, communicating with others in the workplace, tips for work-life balance, and then we'll wrap up. We did have a Q&A within the live session, but just know that you can reach out to me anytime. I'll put my contact information up there. Starting out, again, my name is Caroline. I'm a career advisor. I also live with cyclothymia, which is on the bipolar spectrum, OCD, and ADHD. My perspective today is informed by career advising I am a career coach. I was involved with career advising and coaching for the past 8 years. My doctorate, again, is in organizational behavior. And first and foremost, I am a peer. I have navigated this through trial and error myself. And I like to state that because DBSA, being so focused on peer support, has really been life-changing for me. And I first and foremost think of myself as a peer to this group. So just know I'm not perfect. This is like stuff I navigate as well. I'm a peer first and foremost, who just happens to have a little bit more knowledge of this particular subject. So just know it's not a perfect art. So mood disorders affect emotions as well as energy. This can impact your bandwidth, your concentration, and stress levels, which of course all impact your work. And just like we are all unique, everyone's needs are unique. Something that will impact one person may not for another. Learning what your personal needs are and triggers for your mood episodes will help you to stay stable over time. So some of the ones that might work for me might not work for you. Conversely, something that works for you might not work for me. So just know that no condition is all encompassing. The mileage will vary based on your particular experience. That said, there are some common factors that go into jobs and work that often come up for people with mood disorders. The first one is a schedule. So, because mood disorders are so linked to more sensitive circadian rhythms, a schedule can really have an impact on your well-being. So, considering whether you have a consistent 9 to 5 job or an unpredictable schedule, how many hours per work how many hours you work per day and days per week can have an impact, and whether you're working part-time or full-time will have an impact. Just to use myself as an example, I used to work in the entertainment industry where I worked very irregular hours, long days, all of that. Fun, but unpredictable in that way. And now I work more of a traditional 9 to 5. For me, that was really helpful. But other people may, it might impact them in different ways. So that's just one particular example of a schedule affecting your mood episodes. The pace. People prefer, faster paces or slower paces. So your own preferences will kind of dictate there. Whether your workload varies from day to day will have an impact, and how you cope with those shifting priorities will have an impact on your symptoms, your triggers, all of that. Your environment. This is something that became more and more spoken about after the pandemic, after COVID. So working from home, in office, or hybrid, those all have different environmental effects that can impact your mood, triggering different symptoms and whatnot. If you have sensitivity to sound and light, that is very common for people with mood disorders. And whether you prefer to be indoors at a desk or outdoors, that will all have an impact as well. Again, using myself as an example, I'm very sensitive to sound. So I found that working in a huge cubicle farm didn't really do me any favors in terms of managing my mood condition. However, now that I work primarily from home, I'm able to manage that a lot more. So again, your mileage will vary, but those are some things to consider. And if you are experiencing that, that's normal. And then people, of course. Part of it, of course, is introvert versus extrovert, but also understanding the personalities that you work well with, which ones you tend to have challenges with for any number of reasons, and how you feel about managing others is a big one. There's individual contributors have a very different set of interactions with people than somebody who is managing people might have. So any of those factors related to interfacing with other people can also have an impact on your symptoms, both positively and negatively. So live, we did a 5-minute reflection on what affects you. So you watching the recording, our prompt is to think about something that has an effect on your mood at work, and think about if there's anything that could be adjusted to improve things. And it's completely okay if you're not sure yet. So if you're watching, pause the recording, take 5 minutes to write what your thoughts are down, and then we'll move on to the next section. All right, moving on to energy at work. So everyone has different times when they have more or less energy, but there's also different kinds of energy that interact with each other. So for the purposes of this conversation, there are 3 different types of energy we're going to touch on. So the first, of course, is circadian energy. So that's, whether you're an early bird or a night owl. One of our previous recordings, we talked about that extensively, your chronotypes. So that's when you naturally have more energy and when you naturally get tired based on the time of day. So that is absolutely going to have an impact on your energy. Another is the tasks that you're doing. So whether a specific task energizes or drains you. So for example, somebody might really hate doing spreadsheets, but they actually have quite a lot of energy managing events. The energy that goes into doing the task that they have more trouble with or aren't as focused on, those are more likely to drain them versus ones that they enjoy or whatnot. And to use that example as well, it could be that because the task is more involved with managing an event, it's possible that even though they enjoy that, it drains their energy more. So tasks will have their own individual impacts, even if it's something that you enjoy. And then social. This again can go back to the introvert and extrovert factor, but it can also impact the types of social energy. So, for example, I love giving live group presentations. For that, I am energized. I also love talking to people one-on-one, but I find that that is a little bit more draining because it's more intense focus on one person. So even though I enjoy both, I know that those one-on-one conversations are going to drain my energy faster than doing a group presentation. So again, it can be something that you enjoy, but the energy impact is going to vary depending on your own preferences and needs. So understanding your own energy patterns can help you to take steps to work with yourself and with your energy rather than against it. I also will preface all of this with there are definitely situations where, depending on the nature of your job, you might not be able to control everything. The goal here is to give you some options for different ideas that might help you in your particular circumstances. So, questions to consider regarding your energy at work. First off, what is the schedule like? So when do you typically wake up if you don't have to be at work at a particular time? Is that aligned with your work schedule? And what time of day do you tend to have more energy? When do you tend to have less? I'll again use myself as an example. I tend to have the most energy between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. Then I have another burst of energy from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. And then the other periods of time, I don't have as much energy. That's not to say that I'm totally exhausted. I can still do things, but I know I'm at my best within those periods of times, just based on my circadian energy. So planning around that is a little bit easier to manage than I have an appointment at 4 o'clock and then I'm very tired afterwards. So circadian energy can factor into it. Task-based. So again, these are the types of activities that you enjoy, but also which ones require the most focus, the most attention? Are there any that you can think of that make you feel more or less tired after you engage with them, regardless of whether you enjoy them or not? The fact of the matter is, even if you enjoy something, it still is something that you have to consider energy-wise. And then social, interacting with people. What are your social situations that tend to energize you? Which ones drain you? So having that in mind can help you actually address your schedule, which we'll get into in a little bit. But before that, we have another reflection activity. Considering your personal energy at work, how can you think, or can you think of any examples of how the following types of energy shows up for you? And again, circadian, task-based, social. So if you're watching the recording, pause for about 5 minutes, write down any reflections, and then start playing it again, and we'll talk about schedules. So now we're going to talk about energy pacing. So having a sense of your own energy patterns can help you to take those steps to adjust your schedule to the extent possible, to better match with your ebbs and flows. So I'm going to bring up some different ways to look at your schedule to work with your energy so that you're not unintentionally exhausting yourself unnecessarily. So one is to pace out your day. So everyone has those times of day where they have more or less energy. For me, again, that was 10 to 12 and then 1 to 3. I tend to have more. Planning more active tasks for when you have more energy and more passive ones for when you tend to be more tired can help here. So for example, you might want to schedule appointments or meetings during the times where you have more energy, but more professional development, things that are a little bit more passive, but still productive outside of those windows, that might be a good time. So, maybe if you know that you have the most energy in the morning, maybe the afternoon, then you take time to read or do any kind of professional development webinars and whatnot. So just kind of adjusting when you're doing things can help here. Blocking out time to rest. So sometimes it gets hard to get away from your desk. I know I definitely struggle with it. But if you have a formal lunch break, I recommend blocking it out on your calendar, and actually taking that break. Preferably, get away from your desk, go outside for a period of time. But if you can't do that, at least move away from your desk. So even if it's like you go into the break room or something for a little bit. I do recommend doing that because it resets your brain. And taking those steps away has actually been linked to creativity. That's why we have those shower thoughts. Not thinking about something and allowing your brain to rest actually helps you process things. And again, sometimes you only have a 15-minute break during the day. I still recommend trying to get up and go outside if possible, because that'll really help your brain and give you an energy reset. So then your week, you can also pace out. So to the extent possible, if you know that you're able to schedule meetings and appointments and whatnot, if you have some sort of autonomy over that, spreading it out over the week, rather than clustering all of the activities that are more likely to drain you, between 1 to 2 days can help it can help prevent burnout. This is something I learned the hard way. I tend to want to jump right in and do all of my work on Monday and then, for lack of a better way to put it, relax the rest of the week. But that wound up just burning me out more than if I had just broken it up. So if you have the ability to break things up, that can be helpful in terms of matching your energy. And then pacing out your year. If you work in an industry that tends to have busy and quiet times, you can take preventative steps in advance to plan your schedule around it, particularly because sleep is so crucial for people who have mood disorders. That could look like during busy times being especially vigilant about your sleep and not planning too much extraneous things that you know are more likely to drain you during that period of time. And then when it's quieter, you can use that to do other things as well beyond work because you have more energy that you're not expending in the same way. So pacing out your year in that way can sometimes help too. So next activity, working with your energy and schedules at work. Identify something that affects your energy, either increases it or decreases it. And think about if there's a way you can make adjustments to your work schedule to use that to your advantage. So pause the recording, take 5 minutes to reflect, and then when we resume, we'll be on to the next section. Now we're going to talk about communication at work. Knowing your patterns will help you to express it to others and to advocate for yourself. So the reason why we dove into our own triggers so much to begin with is to understand them. And then from there, you know kind of what's going on so you can explain it better to other people. So we'll come up with some strategies here. The first thing I want to start with is you are in control of how much information you want to share. So the shared context of any of your relationships at work is work. So you can choose to share or not share what you feel comfortable with beyond that. This again is not it doesn't factor in accommodations, though we will talk about that. This is just in terms of social discussion. So if you don't feel comfortable talking about your personal life at the workplace, that's completely valid. That's completely fair. We will talk again about accommodations. And next month, we're actually going to have a special guest who will talk about it as well. But this is more in the So knowing your warning signs is really important. Just as everyone's symptoms are your own episode is coming on, it can help you prepare and have good communication at work because you So, of course, there's common warning signs. These are all, related to the symptoms that we all experience, or maybe some of them we do, some of them we don't, whatever your flavor is. These are some common warning signs that a mood episode might be coming on. So we've got irregular sleep, rapid thoughts, irritability, reduced impulse control, low energy, conversely, trouble concentrating, moving faster or slower than usual for that person, starting a lot of projects at the same time without being prompted to. I do want to make that distinction within work because sometimes you have to start a lot of projects. Loss of interest in activities that are usually of interest to you, and unusually low or high mood, of course. So these are just a couple of common warning signs. Other people might have different ones. So before we move forward, another activity is to think about what your warning signs are when you have a you feel a mood episode coming on. Think about 1 to 2, if you can identify them. And from there, we'll move on to actually the communication element of discussing with people at work. So some general tips, setting boundaries. So a lot of times when I know, at least for me, when I hear the term set boundaries, it seems a bit confrontational sometimes, where it's like, I have to set this boundary with this person because I don't want to get hurt. In this case, I'm thinking more in terms of boundaries between yourself and work. So in this case, if you notice your warning signs are starting to come on, consider taking sick time if you have it, adjusting your projects in advance if possible, because you're needing to prioritize your health. So that's a good way to frame it in that, okay, I'm noticing my health is needing to come first right now. What are the adjustments and boundaries that I can do with work to make sure that I'm staying well? So within the context of setting boundaries in this way, that's more what I mean. However, by all means, set boundaries from a person to person standpoint if you feel that is necessary. Um, One strategy for that is sometimes effective is be willing to compromise a bit. So while health, of course, comes first, making compromises that you feel comfortable with can help show that you're a team player as well. So, for example, if there's a particular thing that you're not feeling like you're able to do, like maybe adjusting your schedule so it's earlier, but you're having trouble sleeping, perhaps you can suggest to somebody, listen, I can't do that, but is there something I can do later in the day that might be helpful too? Sometimes, you might be able to do a trade-off with another person. For example, I had, when I worked in visual effects, I had a sensitivity to the computer screens, and I couldn't really tell the difference between different sizes and shapes of things that really needed a precise eye. So what I did was, listen, coworker, I am happy to do all of the prep work if you are able to do this part that I'm having trouble with. And that worked out great. I was able to do things that I felt comfortable with and that I felt I could execute well. And then he didn't have as much he needed to do as well. So we were working together in that way. So if there is some sort of circumstance where you're willing to compromise a little bit, that can often go a long way in terms of setting boundaries for yourself, but still helping others in the office. Um, and knowing specifically what it is that's going to help you in these circumstances can help you ask for it more clearly. For example, if you know people have seasonal affective disorder, if you know it has to do with the light and needing to get more light, it's a lot easier than to say, listen, I have this condition. This would really help me. Can we discuss that? In terms of maybe I could get a different lamp or I could sit outside or something like that. If you know exactly what it is that it will help you and you're able to offer that, that makes it a lot easier for the person to say yes. So requesting accommodations, sometimes you can request reasonable accommodations under ADA. Bipolar and depression, any of those mood disorders, are considered disabilities. So there are different options that you can request regarding accommodations. And again, we'll be diving into this a lot more next month. So please come back for that. But this is just a brief overview. So some common accommodations that you can use or request: adjusted start and end times, extra breaks or time off if you need to go to a doctor's appointment, noise canceling headphones. That one really was a game changer for me when I worked in that cubicle farm. Daylight lamps, which we were just talking about. If you have seasonal affective disorder, there are lamps that simulate daylight. Working in a quieter or less busy area of the office, that's not going to impact you quite the same way. Working from home, if reasonable, and I'll talk about reasonable in that context in the next slide. And communication adjustments. So, for example, some people do better with written instructions or more regular feedback. So, requesting, I process information better this way. Is there any way that I could get a reasonable accommodation? In that case, with AI tools and whatnot, you could probably request a transcript or something like that, even if it's not them physically writing it down. So these are just some ideas for different things. It's not exhaustive, but just a few ideas for you to consider. Again, you control how much you disclose. So one way I like to frame it is their medical conditions, which is the absolute truth. Mood disorders are medical conditions. You can keep it as simple as that. You have a chronic medical condition, you had a flare up. This is what you need to manage until, your flare up is cleared. If HR requests a letter, you can work with your doctor on phrasing that you feel comfortable with. But that I've found has been a really effective one to protect yourself, but disclose just enough that you can work on accommodations together. So some tips, knowing who to ask. If minor, you can likely just ask a supervisor and it doesn't even need to be a formal accommodation. So for example, if I was in a really noisy area of the office and I'm having trouble concentrating, and it's making me irritable, I could potentially say, listen, it's a little loud right now. Is it okay if I work out of the conference room? Like during this period of time, maybe there's a meeting every week at that time. And so, saying, can I work out of a quieter part of the office for that hour every week? Chances are you don't need a formal accommodation for that. Your boss will either say yes or no. If it is more involved or you're not comfortable telling your supervisor, then it may make sense to bring in HR as well. It just kind of depends on what it is you're asking for. Emphasize the ask. So you don't need to give all of the context for this is my diagnosis, this is how it tends to manifest for me, blah, blah, blah. You keeping it to the context of what you're talking to the person about really helps. So know what it is you want to ask for and just get to the request part as soon as possible. So, something simple like I have this medical condition, it's flaring up. This particular thing is affecting me negatively. Could we work on something that might help manage it until my flare-ups calm down? Keeping it focused on that request can be really helpful here. And then there is the notion of reasonable accommodations. So one example I like to give is if you work at a quarry, asking to work from home isn't necessarily a reasonable request based on the nature of you're working in a cave. You can't really bring a rock home and work on it there and bring it back. I don't know, maybe you can. But it should not impose a disproportionate or undue burden on the organization. So if it is something that is reasonable within the context of work, so for example, there's other people on shift starting at 8. It would be really helpful if you start at 8:30, but there's people there who could open the door and whatnot and speak to customers. That would be much more likely to be a reasonable accommodation than if you were the only person who could open the front door and everything and greet people. So just realize reasonable accommodation, that is what they're meaning with that. And our last section here is on focusing on your life. My firm philosophy is you should work to live and not live to work. The goal of work, at the very basic nature of it, is to give you a way to get the money that you need to do the things that you enjoy, and to live a life that you're happy with. If you like your job, and you should you should aspire for that. You should be doing something that you enjoy, ideally. That makes it a lot easier, but it is still work and you have life beyond work. So one thing I do encourage, similar to that idea of taking breaks, is your time after work is your time. Rest time is really important. It's been linked to greater creativity, more effective work overall, giving your brain that time to relax and focus on something else. That's worth protecting. I also have some other suggestions here, specifically because I feel like a lot of resources focus on diet and exercise. I'm going to specifically give suggestions that aren't those two, because everybody says it. They are very important, I will say, but here's some other things that you can sort of weave into it beyond just those two. Having a wind down routine. Put your work stuff away, step away from your computer, go for a walk. anything that's going to signal to your brain that it's time to stop working, and it's time to start resting. During the COVID pandemic, a lot of people noticed that this wind down routine of commuting back home was suddenly not there when they worked from home. So I heard a lot of stories about people going for a walk around the block to signal, we're done with work right now. For me, one of the things I do is at 5 o'clock, one of my signals is I go make a cup of tea and I text my friend who lives on the East Coast. We both tell each other what we're having for tea, and that's a signal to me like I'm done with work for today. It's time to rest. So having some sort of wind down routine is helpful. Treat your hobbies and interests as priorities. So think of work as a means of making it possible for you to do your hobbies and your interests. If it's having a very positive effect on your mental health, that is worth protecting. So taking time to do the things that you enjoy, put it on your to-do list. I color code my to-do list in green, because I find green to be a soothing color. Anything that I want to do to relax, I highlight in green and I just check it off like anything else on my to-do list. So scheduling dates with yourself to do those things, anything really to remind you that those things are worth prioritizing, and those are important parts of self-care. Mindfulness. So mindfulness is staying in the moment. So you're not focusing on what happened or what's going to happen. You're just staying in the present. Um, Very helpful for managing anxiety and stress. Um, I specifically wanted to put together a list of things that were not just guided audio meditation. For me, I find it doesn't work quite the way it does for other people, which is totally fine. But I figured I'd put together a list of other options for practicing mindfulness that isn't just listening to an audio recording of a meditation. So one is silent meditation, so you don't have to listen to anything. You just kind of do it on your own. So that's one option. Journaling and creative writing is a very good way to sort of stay in the moment, just focus on thoughts as they're coming up. Reading, mindful walking. So just being very intentional about your steps and just thinking about the process of walking. Arts and crafts are a great way to, feel that flow state, and be in the moment. For me, I crochet a lot. Actually, when I go to DBSA meetings, I often bring my crochet supplies because I find it helps me to listen better. I'm able to focus one stitch at a time, and then I'm actually better at hearing other people. Mindful eating, so just focusing on eating and the textures, and whatnot. That's a way of practicing mindfulness. Listening to music, and really anything that gets you into a flow state where you are just focused on that activity and you're not thinking about the future, the past, just enjoying the moment. So those are some ideas for mindfulness specifically. Practicing good sleep hygiene. Sleep, of course, is crucial for people with mood disorders as our circadian rhythms are more sensitive. So trying to keep it as consistent as possible. I fall into this trap a lot where it's the weekend and I want to stay up late and everything. And then it's a wildly different schedule than what I keep during the week. Being conscious of that and just making adjustments in that sense can be helpful, in terms of managing episodes and your symptoms. So this is our final reflection activity. So I just asked, what is a hobby of yours that or something that relaxes you? And how can you prioritize doing more of that activity? So feel free to pause the recording for this last reflection activity, and then we'll wrap up. So in closing, I really encourage people to make work work for them. Knowing yourself, how you work best, and what you value can help you to approach work in a way that supports you best. So just remembering that your life is a combination of work, and the things that you do outside of work. I really like the term work-life balance. I have heard the term work-life harmony come up a lot recently, and I prefer balance because you're constantly having to find a balance. That's something that I'm acutely aware of, myself being somebody with a mood disorder. But finding that balance day to day is important, and prioritizing both. Whereas harmony, I feel like it kind of implies one is going to take priority over the other, for different periods of your life. And I really think it's a combination. So I encourage you to consider that with anything you do, work wise and life wise. Thank you so much for watching this recording. Again, I am Dr. Caroline Fraissinet. You can reach me at dbsacalifornia@gmail.com. And if you're interested in learning more about my practice, Career Wavelength, my website is here too. I offer one-on-one coaching. I'm just starting group coaching in August, so that is exciting. I offer digital downloads. I do blog. So if you're interested in following me, feel free to reach out at the website or reach out to me via email. Always happy to connect with people who are enjoying the workshops. So, with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and to see you at the next session, which will be our last one all on accommodations and disability. So, please join us then. And in the meantime, enjoy your day.